Hello, Sabelet back again doing another UPL video. We've moved into week 2 at this point, so I'm glad I'm keeping this up decently. But I am recording a slew of these all at once, so probably going to take a little bit to implement any feedback people give me. But for right now, we've got Unowndragon versus YBW. This should be a fun matchup. Both players known to bring some older stuff, more of that like Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic, Recover Mewtwo, but also very capable of mixing it up with some newer stuff. So let's just hop right into game 1 and see how this ends up going. So Gengar lead from Unowndragon, Tauros from YBW. This is a really interesting lead scenario, actually, because there's a lot of ways that both of them can play it. A lot of times Gengar is backed up by an Executor, which means that Tauros clicking Earthquake can end up just like thudding into the Executor and you get put to sleep afterward. But at the same time, Tauros has like decent odds to Paraslam Egg and just get bailed out of the matchup. Sometimes behind Gengar there is a Zapdos, and that can come in on Earthquake and then click T-Wave, but that's more of an older thing. So Tauros might genuinely consider clicking like a Blizzard or a Body Slam here, but at the same time, like Gengar can stay in and go for this Hypnosis. Ultimately, like it is a speed tie, you are risking crit Earthquake, but some people will go for it, so it's not the easiest thing with Tauros to click anything other than EQ here. And ultimately, both of them just stay and go for it, and YBW gets some nice chip, but the Tauros gets put to sleep. That's a pretty okay outcome, I think, on YBW's side. It's a lot worse if you don't hit the Gengar at all, because then it has a lot more free reign pivoting in on stuff like Snorlax, Tauros, or Mew later, when it's not just going to get O-code for it. Now it's very hard to go to Gengar against most things. There's a lot of immediate boom pressure. If I'm Unowndragon, I consider just ripping the boom right away, but also you might just save it to let it get sacked to sleep later. And out comes Eggy, so looking to spread some Stun Spore. We keep seeing this every game of Egg versus Mewtwo, and the Egg tends to get blizzarded, but here it's actually Barrier 2 from YBW that gets Stun Spored. So this is an interesting thing I notice with a lot of players who play older sets, is that they get absolutely destroyed by Barrier 2. And the reason for that is a lot of times their teams just don't have anything that can really hurt it. They don't have enough booms. They don't really have enough ways to just get past it. And a lot of the Pokemon are weak to Ice Beam, so you get scared out and end up giving it free turns. Here, this might be a bit premature, because honestly, if Egg just rips the boom immediately on it, you can probably force this out at the cost of either like Gengar and Egg booming, or maybe even just one. I'm honestly not sure off the top of my head how much that explosion does here, but we'll see exactly what Unowndragon chooses to do. YBW going for it this early is a little wild. And Unowndragon going back to Gengar, so Amnesia's up on YBW's side. Gengar boom, definitely weaker, but it's obviously very telegraphed that this is going to boom now. And with the Mewtwo, with Barrier 2, you do want to catch Paralysis to avoid getting put to sleep or frozen later. So he already caught the Paralysis. YBW has the option to bail out at this point and not even deal with any of this, not risk the crit boom or anything. I think this early in the game, risking the crit boom is a little bit wild. I think you just go to Tauros, but if you stay in and you don't get crit boom, this is going to do like 30%. Yeah, 27%. So you just eat that for free, and this Mewtwo is still a threat. I think Unowndragon needs to start doing something about this, or this is going to be a very quick 6-0. And the Mewtwo starts setting up. Once it's at +6 defense, there is no Mew set that realistically breaks through without booming it. Earthquake's like a 5-hit KO. If you crit, though, it's a 3-hit KO, but 3 crits in a row is a big ask. And YBW going for the Ice Beams immediately is kind of strange. So Ice Beam versus Mew does about like 46 to 54, I want to say. Yeah, and the calc's on screen. I'm not sure if that's a little bit cut off, but 46.4 to 54.5. But if you go to +4, you start doing like 50 to 60-ish. Because of the stat cap, you can't actually get that much damage. But the point of doing that is so Mew can't just sit there soft-boiling through it. You slowly break through anyway. So a bit weird that YBW is just going for it straight away, but he does get the freeze, so This is looking like a pretty clean sweep. And this might look like, oh, Mewtwo is just so broken, there's nothing you can do about it. But I really do think a big extent of this is in the team building. People just are not respecting Barrier 2, and in the fact that people just don't boom it. When you see that barrier go up, just you gotta start throwing things at it really quickly and not give it free turns. So if this Mew didn't have boom, then this was just not it. You just needed to go to another boom user or like a at least like a Snorlax or Tauros or something and try to crit through it. So Unowndragon goes to Mewtwo intending to just stall it out because once you boost up, you're fine. The problem is Barrier 2, like Barrier has 48 PP, Amnesia has 32 PP, Recover has 32 PP. Stalling this is very hard, especially when it's paralyzed and your Mewtwo is not. I'm going to bet because it's Unowndragon, this is going to be Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic, Recover Mewtwo, which has like 32 less PP. You do have the threat of Psychic drop against the other Mewtwo, which can roll it over if it tries to stall with Amnesia. But beyond that, you're not really threatening anything. You can get stalled out. Okay, immediately proven wrong, so that's Thunder Wave. YBW switching out of Barrier 2 is interesting to me. I feel like you could have just stayed there and wasted a lot of PP at least. I don't think this Mewtwo is that much of a threat to it. But goes to Chansey and starts clicking Sing, and Unowndragon with no way to block that, just gonna try to hit it and break it before Sing lands. And with that, I would say this is probably over if that Mewtwo doesn't wake up really quickly. So I think this is just like a huge team builder weakness to Barrier 2. I'm gonna guess after Gengar Executor and this Mew and a T-Wave Mewtwo with Amnesia, Thunder Wave, Blizzard, and probably Boom last, or maybe another attack like Psychic. I'm going to guess there's probably a little bit more physical offense and a little bit more T-Wave in those last couple of slots, but we don't quite know yet. On YBW's side, could really be anything. It's interesting to see Barrier 2 plus Chansey, and then this Mew set will probably say a lot. But ultimately, this looks like a game that Barrier 2 wins because of the other side not bringing a Chansey, not bringing a Cloyster, not bringing anything really that can stand up to it. You can defensively wall it with any ice type, or even Chansey can just sit there and eat the freeze, and then you can stall out the rest of the PP with Mewtwo and Mew and use recovery moves to stall out 16 ice beams. So Unowndragon going to go back to Mewtwo, try to wake it up on this Chansey. Pretty safe play overall. If I'm YBW, I'm going straight to a physical attacker if I have one and trying to beat this before it wakes up because Seismic Toss is only a 5-hit KO. And the fact that YBW is doing this means that he just wants to resleep the Mewtwo, but I think this is really risky. And Unowndragon switching out after burning off 4 turns, I think I actually like that a lot because that means you can get the Mewtwo back into the game later without having to let the Chansey get a resleep right now. So Snorlax comes in to just beat down on it and is probably going to win this exchange pretty handily. A Cloyster from YBW's side, so you've got a bit of a switch in, although Cloyster switching into Snorlax is always scary, can go very wrong. And I am really interested in what's going on with YBW's team here. Cloyster, Rhydon, Chansey is like a super strong defensive core against almost anything except for T-Bolt Tauros. Rhydon obviously insulates Cloyster against like hard-hitting attacks like Tauros Hyper Beam, Snorlax Hyper Beam, Boom, and of course walls Zapdos. Chansey walls all the special attackers to an extent. Obviously, Mewtwo can break through. But I have a few issues with running this in Ubers. It's more foundationally solid in OU. The biggest problem, I think, is that every single Snorlax here is going to have 4 attacks or something else that helps it break this. Cloydon is not that good at stopping 4-attack Snorlax because it will get a lot of damage on them and set it up for other things to clear through. Second, Amnesia Mewtwo just handily destroys this. If sleep is already used and they don't mind taking paralysis, it will break the Chansey and it will destroy Cloydon. Unparalyzed Mewtwo, of course, is a huge threat. If the Snorlax or something else ever lands a boom on the Chansey, then it's just open season for Mewtwo to just tear through those things. And of course, there's just like not very much paralysis support. If this Mew doesn't have T-Wave, then it's all on Chansey to spread T-Wave, and Cloydon both need a lot of T-wave spread to do anything. So I think YBW bringing a lot of stuff that seems oriented at countering some things that Unowndragon commonly brings, but I don't know if I love how it all fits together. I think there's some stuff missing here, but again, the Mew set could say something that actually changes that. Another problem with this whole Colloidon idea is like Psychic T-Wave Mew honestly bullies it really hard after the Chansey goes down, which again, it's Ubers, there's a million boom users, it's not hard to make that happen. So we'll see how this goes. I think that YBW ultimately can just fight this Snorlax with Rhydon or what have you and get some good damage out. Already has a pretty great lead here, and there's not really switch-ins with the Mew frozen and the Mewtwo slept. Like, you've got 3 Pokemon left, so it's fine, but I don't know how this would be doing in a more even game. If Unowndragon had a Cloyster, I think that would have done insanely well here, looking at YBW's team. It probably does pretty well against the Mew, depending on the set. It definitely does well, like fine against the opposing Cloyster, good against Rhydon. Seismic Toss Chansey can't break it without multiple paralysis, and of course there's a barrier Ice Beam too, which would have been completely walled. So definitely picking up on the lack of Cloyster here and running a whole team that would have gotten obliterated by it. But just going to use the Rhydon to get some damage. Now surely going to get out, and Unowndragon smartly doubling on that. Snorlax here probably should Earthquake, but really you can Body Slam too, either or. And gets a Paralysis, so nice call out, correctly predicts which of Cloyster and Rhydon is coming in. If I'm in YBW's shoes here, I'm just thinking of immediately booming. And does not boom and immediately punished for that. Now it's potential Hyper Beam coming in. YBW could have called that with Rhydon, but gets a bit of good luck. Don't know if I love resting there. I think just ripping the boom would have been perfectly fine. It would have essentially neutered the Snorlax. So this is fine, and that Cloyster still has a chance here to boom, but I think YBW wants to try to rest loop or something, and I just don't think that's it. So again, in Hyper Beam range, again, going to play a 50-50, and this time going to Rhydon on it. And Unowndragon not taking the bait seems pretty obvious, but doesn't get rewarded for it and doesn't go all the way into the call out and click Earthquake. So Snorlax is down, Unowndragon is quickly running out of options here. Depending on the last, may not even really have a way through. The fact that the last hasn't been shown yet, despite the fact that Egg can't do that much to Chansey without getting some luck, suggests to me that it either can't break one of Cloyster or Rhydon, or it's just I actually wonder what his last is. I would think that this is like a Tauros or Zapdos maybe, but I'm going to guess that whatever it is not going to have a great time versus Cloydon. So here's the Tauros, and comes in as YBW is just PP stalling with Sing / trying to cover for the Mewtwo wake up. So very smart of Unowndragon not to fully wake it up, because you want to be able to get that Mewtwo back in later when the Chansey isn't there. So Tauros actually is very good in Ecloidons if it has T-Bolt, but I'm going to guess that YBW saw in the scouting that Unowndragon does not use T-Bolt on Tauros. So gonna go for the attack on Chansey. If this gets T-Waved, I would say this is handily over and Cloyster is just gonna clean it up, although the Mewtwo can wake, and that is scary. So YBW sacking Tauros, I don't actually like this because I feel like Unowndragon can try to wake up Mewtwo. But instead just gonna keep pushing with Tauros, either predicting that YBW would pivot on that turn or just deciding to take the KO. Even paralyzed Tauros is quite the threat to Mew, so this might go very badly for YBW. But I do have a hard time seeing how he loses from here unless he just really, really misplays the rest of his resources. If this Mew is boom, I think you just boom it here. If not, then I would just start getting some damage and not worry so much about recovering. Unowndragon doesn't seem to have Leer. Otherwise, surely you click it. And gets out to Eggy, trying to preserve that Tauros HP. The drop on Mew might actually be very important. That'll ensure it's slower than Mewtwo if it wakes up, or the Tauros when it comes back. 256 miss here doesn't really matter. It just means the Mew has slightly more HP, and it's slower than Egg here, so you have to watch out for Boom. Great call by YBW. Catching that Boom pretty much leaves Unowndragon completely out of resources. I don't know if I agree with, like, even trying that boom, though. I think you just need to keep psychicking and going for drops. You don't have enough Pokemon left. But maybe if Mewtwo wakes up, maybe it could have done it, but I'm not sure I believe in it beating Barrier 2 here. Probably just get stalled out. So ultimately, I think that this is going to maybe take a little bit because YBW is probably going to keep recovering with Mew after Swords Dancing to ensure it's faster than Tauros and just try to be at full health when it's hacking this. But I don't really see a way YBW loses this unless he misplays really hard around the Mewtwo when it probably wakes up. So maybe at some point this Mew will finally attack, and it's T-Wave Earthquake Mew, so it is a little bit like weak against Mewtwo depending on the set, but just being able to paralyze it is enough to pretty much ensure victory because you can boom Cloyster and then send Rhydon to clean up. Very hard for Mewtwo to set up unless it gets some full paralysis luck. And Unowndragon finally just kind of saying fuck it and going for a Hyper Beam. Don't really agree with that because you need to crit to even do like 90% and you just let the Mew heal up, so. But I mean, you're desperate in that situation. There's not too much to do. If YBW is smart, this is a T-Wave. So I think that's a mistake from YBW. I think you have the T-Wave on the obvious Wake turn, just to be 100% sure that you don't get screwed by the Mewtwo down the line. Unowndragon, I guess, does not have Recover on this, which makes sense. We've seen the moves. Last was probably self-destruct anyway, but I think you just have to be safe because you never know and there's no reason to risk it. So here you can Earthquake because even Recover won't take you out of range necessarily. And that's it. YBW wins game 1. So looking at the teams, Unowndragon kind of just bringing 2 Sleepers and a bunch of decent Mons. I think that this Mew set is of interest to me, whatever is behind that. With Amni Blizz Boom, I'm going to guess this probably had like T-Wave Earthquake to support Snorlax Tauros in cleaning up. But I don't know, this could have also been a physically offensive Mew, in which case I think that's too much pressure on this Egg and this Mewtwo to get Thunder Waves / Sunspore and set up for physical offense. And YBW running Cloydon plus Chansey is kind of a stop to physical offense, but again, like 4 attacks, physical lax. Not really super stopped by it. Tauros, especially T-Bolt Tauros, not really super stopped by it. So I get where his head's at, and I think that he got the right read on what Unowndragon is bringing. I don't necessarily know that I love this team style into it. And I do wonder about running T-Wave Earthquake Mew and Chansey alongside this Barrier 2, because in my mind, I would think you want like more booms, more high pressure offense to remove things so that Barrier 2 can come in and clean up the rest. Like, there's not really, unless this Tauros has T-Bolt, there's really nothing here that deals with an opposing Cloyster at all. This Chansey can't do it, this Mew can't do it. You're like relying on Rhydon to get Paraslam and Rock Slide on it and take it out, or your Cloyster to trade booms with it after getting a bunch of clamps. Otherwise, you just lose to Cloyster. So I am curious what the thought process was there, but ultimately worked out for YBW in the end. So on to game 2. We've got a Tauros lead from Unowndragon and a Gengar on YBW side, so we've seen this exact thing before, and this is a Zapdos on Earthquake moment. So going to try to T-Wave with Zapdos and force some pressure there. Unowndragon deciding to stay and slug it out rather than try to catch that T-Wave with a Mewtwo. Pretty much says that Unowndragon probably doesn't have a Rhydon. He might, because sometimes you don't want to go Rhydon in the Zapdos and just let up the chance for opposing Executor to come in and get sleep. But this probably says no Barrier 2 from Unowndragon, no Mewtwo set that likes taking paralysis, so you just use the Tauros to keep pushing and not let up the pressure. And a lucky Paraslam, full para, 7.5% chance, and now going to the Golem. That's interesting. Not choosing to go to the rock right away to absorb T-Wave, choosing to risk the Tauros on that, maybe thinking if this gets T-Wave that sleep blocks Gengar, which is fair logic, but I think the problem is usually these Gengars are backed up by an Executor, and Executor is going to have no problem psychicking that Tauros down if it tries to come in and block sleep. But it works out for him here because he gets everything with the Tauros, and now Golem's in. So YBW probably going to Executor if he has it, and Unowndragon smartly doubling the Tauros to not just let Executor get the most free sleep. Paraslam immediately, but this time actually does get hit through it with a sleep powder. So now YBW is free to like start playing the game a bit more. And Tauros Golem Zapdos revealed so far from Unowndragon. I'm going to let this turn play out and then just talk about the teams a bit. Expected boom. So Unowndragon running something really odd here with Tauros plus Golem kind of suggesting a more physical offense angle, and maybe Zapdos suggesting that there's some T-Wavers back here, maybe some T-Wave Mew and Mewtwo to help set up the physical offense, but then you've got the Tauros in the very front. And again, like Golem plus Zapdos plus Tauros is just asking to get ripped up by a Barrier 2, by an Amnesia Blizzard Mewtwo if it can avoid paralysis. So I don't know, this does seem a bit scary. But on the flip side, YBW has shown Gengar, Zapdos, Executor, and just boom the Executor to take the Zapdos mostly down, which means that Golem is now a lot more free to do some damage with no Eggy to come in on it. So I don't know. This could really go either way. On YBW's side, I am wondering what's going to be behind all this. If it's going to be Amnesia 2 attacks Mew, if it's going to be another T-Wave Earthquake Mew, or if it's going to be more aggressive and have like Hyper Beam or something. A lot of team options open on YBW's side. I'd expect like a Snorlax and then obviously Mewtwo and Mew. That's one possibility. Could also be like a Cloyster. So Ice Beam Mew 2 immediately getting a freeze. There have been a lot of first hit freezes in these first couple of weeks, so it's pretty unfortunate. So I'm gonna guess based on that, this is either Barrier 2 or Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic, Recover Mewtwo. We will probably find out which very shortly thanks to this freeze, and now Unowndragon is really behind in this game. Mew comes in, I'm going to guess it's a T-Wave Mew. If not, then this is really, really bad. But it is, so Unowndragon can sit here and click Soft Boil until this Mewtwo either gets out or fails to get a move off. Now, Ice Beam can max roll 54% at the highest at +2, so YBW really needs to go to +4 here if he's intent on staying in for this. At this point, when you're this far ahead, like it's pretty reasonable to stay in and just try to do this. Mew setting up Swords Dance. If it has Boom, you definitely use the Boom here. So no Boom. I'm going to guess last move is just Earthquake. And I mean, I guess with Swords Dance revealed, it would be very silly if it was just T-Wave, Swords Dance, Boom, but I actually have done something like that before. Ultimately, though, I think you just drop Soft Boiled if that's the case. So here, Unowndragon just going to try to set up on repeated full paralyses, but it turns out to be walled by Zapdos, and YBW correctly makes that read immediately and doesn't allow anything there. But Unowndragon has a wall of his own in return for this Zapdos, so going to have to get out to Mewtwo and really hope you can play around this Golem effectively. Golem subbing down. I don't love this so much because it's not like you're not realistically super likely to break this Mewtwo. I think you just have to use some of your other Pokemon here. And Golem HP getting low, or it's opening up that Zapdos to do a lot, especially given the Mono Quake Mew on Unowndragon's side. So Mew gonna come back in here, and now I think you're just playing a lot of games with dancing around the Zapdos, dancing around the Golem. It's ultimately like this situation should be favorable to Unowndragon in wasting the Mewtwo's PP without a threat of freeze and having Golem to come in on Zapdos freely. But I don't anticipate much progress being made without the Golem booming. Golem's big disadvantage over Rhydon is it's very hard to 3-hit KO Mewtwo. That was a very high roll Earthquake, and that still only did 33. Like, you need a lot to KO it. But I don't know why Unowndragon keeps going to the Mew and Swords Dancing like this necessarily. I think you need to be able to make more of a play. Like, this is good, where you Swords Dance up to force the Zapdos and then go Golem so you can get a free Earthquake on entry. But, like, what's your last Pokemon? Are you going to have to boom this Golem to make any progress through the Mewtwo? Because that's really bad. I think maybe the correct play here for Unowndragon is just keep wasting this Mewtwo's PP over and over. And eventually, like when it runs out, then it's fine. I don't know that he has much else, but at least like Mew can keep coming in, soft boiling up, and then using Swords Dance to ensure that the Mewtwo actually has to get out. Going to Zapdos here is odd. Why not just go Golem? Why are you giving that up? So far it's working out in that the Zapdos keeps paralyzing, but I don't understand why do that and then not commit? If you really want the Zapdos gone so badly so that you can boom your Golem on the Mewtwo, why not commit to it? You could have gotten one more hit and it would have gone down to like 18%, and then you're basically there. Yeah, so Golem gonna come in again. Zapdos obviously just gonna get out immediately. If you really want to do this, though, I think you do is you do this loop, but once you boost the Mew up, you just double to the Zapdos. But the thing is, like YBW can also just go to Mewtwo on Zapdos. There's not really a threat there that's any bigger than the Golem. But sacking the Zapdos to get Mew in, I really just don't follow the logic. You can sit here with this Mew and keep stalling. You have 11 more soft boileds for 10 more Ice Beams, 14 Psychics. So it's not perfect, but now you're just going to get slowly drill pecked by Zapdos anytime it gets in on a non-double. Mewtwo still has 27 recovers, so you're going to need a lot of full para turns from it while the Mew comes in and forces it out on full para. I don't know. I don't think that it's likely to go great here. The problem is too, like unboosted Quake Mew does not do very much damage to Mewtwo, so even if it full paras as Mew comes in, it can recover. I think that Unowndragon just got hasty, and I think that's going to cost him a little bit in this one. I don't know who's going to win still, because I think this is going to be a very long sequence of them going back and forth. I am going to at least speed this up to normal, because I don't think there's too much for me to say about this, and if it goes on too long, I'll make it faster. So more loops. Golem's going to come in, get drill packed. And this Golem has like 5 more entries, really. So, oh, there's a crit. Okay, so this immediately changes the dynamic of this. Now you have to be worried about one para. Wow, a double crit. Okay, so I think that immediately puts this game significantly in Unowndragon's favor. Double crit from Golem, very low odds. It has base 45 speed, I want to say, if I remember correctly. So that's like under a 10% chance to crit. Just not very good. But here it got a double crit, so Golem came through. And now getting out of it to the egg. Pretty reasonable bring. And an interesting Blizzard Mew from YBW. That's cool. I think people need to use stuff like that more and not just let Executor get free entry on Mew all the time. The problem is, of course, it's still needed 40, so it's not the least free entry, but you are threatening a couple of 20% crit chances. So that's cool. And this Blizzard Mew looks poised to do a lot of damage. I'm going to guess if it's Blizzard, it probably is a more supporty Mew that has T-Wave, like T-Wave, Blizzard, Soft Boiled +1. Hopefully this thing has like Blizzard Psychic Boom T-Wave or something instead of being this really, I don't know, slow support, but we'll see. And a big Blizzard miss. This looks really bad because now Sleep Powder's on the table. I do think you need to sack the Gengar or go to the Zapdos on Sleep Powder and not like do this. Like Unowndragon's very much telegraphed. I am ahead. I am not afraid of you going to Zapdos because that's free Golem entry. I think you have to just go to Zapdos and then start making some plays. Because going to Zapdos and doubling back to Mew obviously is huge. Blizzard is really scary to Golem, really scary to Executor, and this Mew doesn't want to switch into a maybe T-Wave. But YBW just taking the sleep and now trying to wake it up. If I'm on Unowndragon, I think you kind of have to boom here. You can't just let this keep burning off turns right in front of you. I think you just need to rip the boom, and even if Gengar comes in, that's not really that scary. content to just psychic it down, and it genuinely is probably gonna wake, and there it is. Like, sure, you've got it to -2, but it can soft boiled up and you might miss. Going for a Blizz crit, okay. And not risking a tie if it has T-Wave or Boom, just going to the Zapdos switch walls, and now it's a 50-50 of maybe doubling back. If I'm YBW, I definitely double back, but it doesn't do it this time. I'm just gonna save that Mew for later and see if you can get something. Hard Snorlax and a Golem is pretty rough. And the egg gets sacked, but ooh, Earthquake. You're right, Earthquake doesn't do quite enough. So at this point, the Snorlax actually does look fairly scary, but you do have to dance around the egg since it got in for free. This is almost certainly a Zapdos turn. Wow, Gengar, okay. So Unowndragon correctly calling that Zapdos could come in to Sleep Block and Psychicking, which obviously also hits Gengar. And now Unowndragon going to Tauros. I don't think I like this at all, actually. Letting Sleep go back on the table makes this Gengar a huge threat. The Golem is near dead. A little more chip and it's in Nightshade range, and then the Gengar could just win. So Nightshading there, wow. Okay. I don't know about that. I understand taking away the potential for it to sub, but I think this Gengar could have won the game by itself. I think that might have been a big mistake from YBW. Because sure, you have this Blizzard Mew, but there's also a Mew on the opposing side. Snorlax is obviously slower than Egg and Golem. Yeah, I don't think you can afford that. I think you have to hard Snorlax into the Golem, knowing that it tanks 2 Earthquakes and doesn't quite go down. And then with Snorlax in, it's kind of a forced Mewtwo sack. And that at least opens up like Blizz Freeze odds. It opens up some stuff. So here, gonna go into Mew on the obvious Blizzard turn. Obviously can't freeze, but like crit could have been scary, for example. And I don't know if I like getting out to Zapdos. Like, sure, the Golem is low, but I don't think this is going to be the win path here. Ultimately, okay, that's a great agility, though. Calling out that possibly Golem coming in, and if not, then at least you kill this Mewtwo and you're faster than everything. So there's definitely odds for YBW here. Drill Peck against Golem should be able to KO it. It's a little less bulky than Rhydon, and Drill Peck does like 8 to 11 to Rhydon. But getting out of this, okay, taking a chance to heal up the Mewtwo or the Mew, it seems. So I'm going to guess that there is a soft boiled on this. Yep. So Blizzard soft boiled and takes the para. Oh no. Oh no. Okay. I think YBW has made a couple of mistakes here that are going to cost this game. I think you just can't do that. I think you just have to go back to the Zapdos. And I know Dragon correctly calling the Zapdos coming in to check the setup Mew. And now even Rock Slide should be range. That crit really doesn't matter. This is still EQ range with or without that crit. So now Golem just gets to clean up. You can boom it here, or you can just get out and take the slow, but I think either one is a winning play here, because then you have Executor to also follow up with a boom. And a Mew that isn't paralyzed, which can do a little extra damage if boom isn't quite enough, which in this case it isn't. So tough game. I think I'm confident in saying YBW made some mistakes there. I think you had to preserve the Gengar, and I think the Gengar could have swept off of hitting one Hypnosis later in the game. I do like how he played around the Golem for the most part, except when that Gengar got involved. Team-wise, this Mew is really interesting. I would love to know what the last 2 moves are. I don't think it had T-Wave because I think you probably would have clicked it before this. And I don't think it had Boom because I think there were a couple chances to click that as well. So ultimately, it just didn't work out in YBW's favor. The Golem plus Monoquake Mew was just too hard to get through in the end. This game kind of shows why I don't love Monoquake Mew, even when you have a Rock Ground to protect it. First off, you get obliterated by Articuno or Dragonite. Second off, even when there's a Zapdos and you wall it with Golem, it also walls your Mew in return, so you end up playing these games of a lot of switching. It is favored to you, but it's still scary. But ultimately, Unowndragon ties it up at 1-1, and we're on to game 3. Egg lead from Unowndragon, Jinx lead from YBW. Immensely YBW favorite, obviously, and just clicks Lovely Kiss and takes the sleep on Egg. I'll be curious to see if Unowndragon has another sleeper, but I'm going to guess not. An immediate Slowbro into Jinx tells a lot about this team. Says, first of all, that there's probably not very good Jinx answers on this team, which is pretty typical for Ubers. Also, Body Slam Jinx is interesting, because a lot of times the only answer to Jinx is like a Mewtwo or Mew. So Body Slam to potentially paralyze them on entry, pretty cool tech. I like that a lot. Executor coming into an obvious T-Wave, just to scare Slowbro with Stun Spore and Boom. And just going to Stun Spore into the Egg, which is already asleep. YBW does now have a sleep blocker, though, which is pretty convenient in case this Egg ever gets a lucky wake up later in the game after 1 or 2 turns burnt, once Jinx goes down. But for now, YBW content to just play this loop and see if he can get a lucky freeze or maybe even just crit the Slowbro to death. Slowbro amnesiaing this time, calling out the Egg coming in. Problem is, you need a lot of boost to do any damage here. And once the Slowbro is paralyzed, it's a lot more vulnerable to everything. I think in YBW's shoes that just booming here is perfectly fine, as he does. And now you're up 5 versus 4. Essentially, the Slowbro's never recovering, so Unowndragon just sacks it. Psychic revealed on Mewtwo. I'm wondering if this is just like some standard double sleeper plus Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic Recover Mewtwo plus some Swords Dance T-Wave Mew. That would be fitting with what a lot of YBW has brought in the past. On Unowndragon's side, Egg Bro Mew is going to probably tell us a lot, and I'm going to guess is the T-Wave Mew if it's coming in here. I like that it's a T-Wave Mew on YBW's side and not some super slow Ice Beam stuff. I'm going to guess that YBW has Amnesia Blizzard and this Mew probably has Swords Dance and Earthquake. Yeah, I don't love this like Swords Dance Earthquake no boom stuff. I would rather just drop Recover here and Ride On from Unowndragon. So a lot of these slow, bulky Pokemon, taking Paralysis on entry pretty immediately makes this Ride On a lot worse, but it should still be able to trade with the Snorlax. I think that's a bit of a wild Body Slam. When the Ride On gets paralyzed on entry like that, it's very reasonable for Snorlax to just stay in and Earthquake it down. So I think that's a bit of a crazy call out, and now you actually don't win this 1v1 even if you don't paralyze, which means Snorlax is a boom threat later. Including right now, it's pretty hard to just hard Ride On again, but he's going to just do it and probably not going to get this. Oh, he does. Okay. So Unowndragon doing a good job getting some value out of the Ride On despite that. And could be anyone's game, although this Snorlax looks incredibly scary even before that crit. And now ooh, this is really bad for YBW. So hard Jinx. If this Jinx is counter, then that's a good bailout here. And if not, then this is really bad, even before that Blizzmiss. I think Unowndragon's firmly in the driver's seat at this point. Although that crit definitely helps. So YBW obviously has a Mew, and I do wonder what the last is. It could really be anything, but I think you might need... Okay, there's some more physical offense. So that suggests that probably that if there's a T-Wave Mewtwo, there's probably a T-Wave Mew as well, so Tauros and Snorlax can get set up to win. And Tauros coming out pretty scary because obviously Snorlax can't take the hit. Mew, Mono Quake Mew is not the greatest in Tauros. So forced to sack the Executor here. I wonder if YBW is going to commit to this or try to heal up, and he does commit. I think healing up would have been wrong for the record because letting Snorlax come back in and boom would have been bad. Now he's going to bail out to Mewtwo. And Unowndragon just amnesias. That's a bit wild. So that Mewtwo 100% does not have T-Wave because you would have probably T-Waved the Tauros. It almost certainly doesn't have Blizzard because if it has Blizzard, you go for it there because it's a good chance to just KO this Mewtwo outright. So that pretty much reveals Amnesia, Ice Beam, Psychic, Recover Mewtwo, and him being afraid of getting into a freeze war and losing. I really don't love that Mewtwo set on this team. You have a Slowbro and a Rhydon. Just run T-Wave, Boom, and try to set one of those things up to win. So I do think that is going to cost him heavily, that he's running such slow, weak Mew and Mewtwo sets that really rely on playing super long games, because the Mew is already paralyzed, so it's not even really a good check to this Mewtwo. Now, notably though, at least the Mew was already faster because of the Mewtwo clicking Amnesia as the other Mewtwo came in. But even so, like, look how weak this is. Because that Earthquake does nothing, you lose the Mew for the Mewtwo, and now it's suddenly YBW is a lot scarier here. Sends in Tauros first. I wonder about that, because I would think you would have a T-Wave Mew and you'd want to send that first. But this suggests non-T-Wave Mew if he's playing it this way. And Mewtwo high rolls the Psychic, it's 47 to 55 unboosted, so that was like pretty favorable to KO anyway. But now, if this isn't T-Wave Mew, YBW just loses. Like, outright. There's almost no chance otherwise. And it's not, so this is over. So ultimately, like, he's gonna spam soft boils and eventually it's gonna freeze or it's gonna roll high a couple times in a row. And this Mew's just done. Unless it tanks 13 Ice Beams in a row, there's no chance. So he might be here for a little bit, but ultimately chance of freeze is going to be somewhere in the range of 75%, 80% at this point. I do not love YBW's odds at all. 16 Ice Beams is like an 82% chance to freeze. But it would be a pretty interesting bailout. That's a max roll Ice Beam, so now YBW might even just die here. And does. And that's game. Unowndragon takes the set. So I do think this was a team builder issue. I think YBW, if this was just a T-Wave Mew, like even like Psychic T-Wave Explosion, soft boiled, this would have been a one game. You T-Wave the Mewtwo, you chip it down a tiny bit, you just call the boom turn, and then Tauros cleans up. And I don't think there's much reason that Unowndragon would have tried to switch out of Mew. YBW runs a lot of T-Wave Earthquake Mew, so it's pretty expected that that's what it is, and you just go for it with Mewtwo. So the boom would have caught Unowndragon, and then Tauros just wins. So ultimately, I think that is a bit of a team builder problem. I also just don't like this Mewtwo on Unowndragon's side. I think that this would have lost most games to most teams, but YBW unfortunately loading something that just didn't have enough T-Wave support once the Mewtwo went down for the Mew, which is a pretty expected trade and not a bad one. There was just nothing left to do. So I think it's a bit of a problem with the team if you're relying on Mewtwo to trade for Mewtwo in order to win. I'm guessing this Mew probably had Hyper Beam plus Earthquake on YBW's side because that's the only explanation for no T-Wave, no Boom. Like, good set with the right support, but the support just doesn't exist here. You're running 3 physical attackers with a Jinx and then 2 things that can even spread status beyond that. I don't think it's enough. So, bit of a team builder problem. On Unowndragon's side, I don't know if I like Egg, Bro, Dawn, Lax on one team. This is absolutely farmed by Cloyster. And then you have the Mono Quake Mew and this really slow Mewtwo. So I think like Cloyster plus any amount of paralysis on Mewtwo and Mew just loses this game to Cloyster immediately. So both of them kind of showing like a glaring hole in their team in this game 3, but ultimately Unowndragon's team had a hole that YBW could not exploit because he just didn't have the pieces for it. YBW's team just had a hole that's a little bit easier to capitalize on here, namely just lack of T-Wave. So congrats to Unowndragon on the win. Not much more to say there. As usual, let me know what you think of the video. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the commentary or other things I could cover. And I'll see you in the next one.